Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We got a good one for you today. Bit shorter than usual, but we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it. Jedd Fisch, going to be the Huskies' new head coach, comes over from Arizona, and I think this is a really smart move for the Huskies. I said it might be smart to hire Ryan Grubb because I thought Grubb would be able to keep a little bit of continuity in the program, but Jedd Fisch is a good head coach, and he's won multiple places. And I understand the reservations here. He's only had one winning season as a head coach in Arizona, but that was last season. And he's going to bring with him his entire offensive staff. That includes Pete Carroll's son, Brandon Carroll. So Pete Carroll is likely going to have a role with this team as the sort of advisor kind of figure. So that's kind of cool as well. Kind of get Pete Carroll involved in there. And I think he deserves a chance to continue to have some sort of role in a football team. If it's not an NFL team, if it's not with the Seahawks, he's going to get a chance to have a role with the Washington Huskies. That's pretty cool. But I think Jedd Fisch makes this program better. I think, obviously there's questions. His press conference yesterday, he basically was asked, do you think you're going to be here long term? And he kind of avoided the question. He kind of skated by it, and he's like, well, how could I answer that? You're right or you're wrong either way is basically what he said. And, he also mentioned wanting to be somewhere where he thinks he can win in either the college football playoffs or win a Super Bowl. And that's really his goal. And, he's here in Washington right now. We'll see how long it lasts. But ultimately, it's hard to really get mad at him if he does end up leaving UW. Because A, he did the same thing to Arizona, so we already know it. And B, if he does leave UW, it means he has success there. And so for Seattle fans, that's a good thing, right? You want your coach to come in, have success, and then if he has too much success, he's going to leave for somewhere else. That's kind of how it works. But it does beg the question, is Washington ever going to be a Tier 1 job? Because I think the perception is there's about 5 or 6 Tier 1 jobs, right? Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, Texas is Tier 1, and then, I would say USC is kind of a 1B, Clemson kind of a 1B. So there's a couple, and Ohio State is Tier 1. So there's about 5 Tier 1s and 2 USC and Clemson, I would say, are 1B. Like, maybe not the most ideal of spots, but they're about as high up as you can go without being at the very top. And then you've got, and Washington right now kind of exists in that Tier 2, which is like Washington, Oregon, Penn State is Tier 2, UCLA, Oklahoma, and there's other schools in there as well. So the question is UW ever going to be able to ascend from Tier 2 into that upper Tier 1? And from a winning standpoint, from their peak seasons, they should be Tier 1. But UW is a peaks and valleys school, whereas other schools, such as like Penn State wins 10 games every year, but they never seem like they're like the best team. UW, I believe, has less wins than Penn State over the past 8 seasons, but UW in the past 8 seasons has gone to the college football playoffs twice. Penn State's never made it. So it's kind of that question of, if you're a peaks and valleys school, how do you make it to the very top? Well, you have to have that broadened consistency. And so Jedd Fisch is a guy who could potentially give you that, but not if he leaves for Florida next year. And there's a lot of people who think the Florida job might be opening next year, right? Not if he leaves for the NFL. There's a lot of people who think he might have NFL ambitions. So that plays a role. But if Jedd Fisch does decide, I can win in Washington long term, then it would make sense for him to stay. Because as far as we know, the other 7 kind of Tier 1 jobs aren't going to be coming open anytime soon, right? I mean, Kalen DeBoer is in Alabama for at least 3 or 4 years. They're not going to fire him even if he struggles year 1. I think Sark is pretty good in Texas. I think Ryan Day at Ohio State, I think they like him there, especially if Michigan gets a new coach this year, which I think they will. Michigan is probably about to hire a new coach as well, so that they're going to be locked up for a while. I think Lincoln Riley likes USC. I don't see any reason for him to leave unless he might pursue the NFL. And so, out of all the tier, and Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart at Georgia and Clemson, they're gonna stick around there for a long time. So the only tier 1 job that I could see maybe opening up would be USC Lincoln Riley if he decided to go to the NFL, and that would be really unfortunate if UW loses Jedd Fisch to USC, because they've already lost like 3 other coaches to USC, most notably Sark. But I do think that unless that USC job opens up, there's not really going to be much of an upgrade for Jedd Fisch. People are saying, the Florida job. I don't think Florida's an upgrade from Washington. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally out of my mind, but I think Washington has proven over the past 7-8 years they are just as good of a school, just as good of a football program as Florida. Florida is kind of a tier 2 as well, and Washington I think is pushing. I think Washington and Oregon are kind of pushing that tier 1B status. But in order to get there, you have to have consistent winning seasons, not peaks and valleys like UW, where college football playoffs one year, then Chris Peterson leaves, you hire Jimmy Lake, and you're losing to Montana. So that's not what you have to have a little more consistency than that to get into that upper echelon of schools. UW is very close, I think, but it's going to take having the same coach there for quite some time. So if Jedd Fisch wins early, which I think he can, then they can get into that upper echelon and stay there. And it's interesting, I think this hire and the staff he's going to bring and the players he's going to bring, this basically makes sure that UW's going to go into the next season as a top 5 school in the Big Ten, right? I think I'm not sure how I feel yet, but off the top of my head, Michigan probably the best, then Ohio State. Probably I would rank Oregon ahead of Washington, but close, and then and USC is up there as well. But I think those are probably your top 5, and then Penn State maybe 6. It's going to be a very competitive Big Ten. I think all 6 of those schools are going to start the season ranked, and then it becomes just how good can Jedd Fisch compete against now that you're playing against significantly tougher competition. Like, I don't think people realize necessarily Wisconsin and Minnesota are not bad programs. Like Northwestern, they win at Northwestern. They win in Iowa. They won 10 games in Iowa. So the idea that there's just a bunch of bad schools on the Big Ten, that is not true at all. Because if you take the bottom of the Pac-12, Stanford, ASU, Cal, Washington State, Colorado, those 5 schools would go winless if they played a full season against Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Like, the Big Ten, the worst schools in the Big Ten would be like middle to upper tier schools, I think, in the Pac-12. So I think Washington, the way I see it, Michigan's at the top, and then I think the next 5, Washington, Oregon, USC, Penn State, and Ohio State, are all kind of in the mix for who's going to be the number 2 team to Michigan in the Big Ten next year. And then I think there's that next tier, like tier 3, which is where I don't think UCLA is in tier 2. I think UCLA is looking at, they're kind of in that 3rd level of the Big Ten alongside the Iowa and the Northwestern, Maryland. And then even the bottom of the Big Ten, got schools like Rutgers, Purdue. They're going to be competitive, but they're not going to be necessarily very worrisome for the rest of these other teams. But yeah, it's definitely a competitive division. It's a competitive conference, and I'm excited to see how UW does, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I would say if they win 8 games, I'd be happy. I would say if they could win a bowl game, that'd be really nice. But I don't think Washington is going to be in the playoffs next season. I do think they will make the playoffs. Probably, if Jedd Fisch stays long term, he will get this team to the playoffs. I'm not going to say next year, though, because we did lose a lot of talent, but I still think this is a winning team and a winning organization. Let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks. The coaching search well underway. John Schneider gave a presser yesterday talking about a lot of different things, but my biggest takeaway from that was that it seems like whether or not John was behind getting rid of Pete, which I don't think he was. I think that was a Jody Allen decision, not necessarily a John Schneider decision, but I think that either way he feels, and I can tell he's sad that Pete's gone, but I do think he's also kind of happy. Because I think John Schneider's been waiting to have this opportunity to be able to run a program and run an NFL team, and he feels like this is his best chance at doing it. He feels like now he finally gets full control. Now he gets the final say on the draft. He gets the final say on trades. He gets the final say on free agents, and he gets the final say on coaching. And I think he's very excited to do that. I think this is something he has been looking forward to. And he's, not that he wanted Pete Carroll to retire, but I think he is still kind of excited about the prospect of him being the guy, which makes sense. It's like people are mad at John Schneider for, orchestrating the demise of Pete Carroll. But it's like, in any job, this is how it works. Like, I worked as a lifeguard over the summer, and I was never going to say that, I want my boss, okay, let me rephrase this. I'm getting confusing. I worked as a lifeguard, and there's the position of head guard, right? I loved all three of the people who were the head guards of my lifeguard pool, but I also, would have liked to have the opportunity to be that head guard. And so as a lifeguard, I'm sitting there like, I can get a pay raise, I can be a little more power, a little more in charge if I'm the head guard. Not that I would ever wish that any of my three head guards were going to leave. I would still be sad that they left, and I would also be happy that I was going to get this new opportunity for myself. So it works both ways. It goes both ways into this. You can be sad that your friend and mentor and partner is leaving, and also be excited about the opportunity that you now have. And I think that's how John Schneider feels. I don't think this is a nefarious man. I don't think that people are calling him a backstabber. People are calling him, a betrayal of Pete Carroll. I don't think this is a betrayal in the sense that John Schneider secretly manipulated the strings to get Pete Carroll fired. I think this was Jody Allen looked at the team and said, I don't think Pete Carroll's going to get us to a Super Bowl, and I want to win another Super Bowl as owner of this team. And so she smartly, I think, said, Pete, your time's up. You're getting too old. The defense isn't good anymore. We don't need you anymore. And I think John, A, feels bad for his friend, and B, is still excited about the opportunity. I don't think that's necessarily a crazy thing to say. All right, one last thing before we go. I want to talk a little bit about the Mariners. The Mariners bringing in a couple of new prospects from the Dominican Republic. So let's talk about them for a quick second. Seattle brings in the number 7 overall international prospect. This is the second year in a row that they have gotten one of the top 10 international prospects. Last year they got Felman Celestin, who is actually number 1. This time, kid's name is Dowell Joseph. Dowell, not sure how to pronounce that. Dowell or Dowell. Let me know in the comments. Dowell. I think it's Dowell. Dowell Joseph. $3 million contract for him. Or not contract, but signing bonus. And this kid looks really talented. He is apparently, this is what scouts are saying, so don't, he's 17. So it's hard to really judge because he's 17. But the scouts are saying he reminds them of if Byron Buxton was a shortstop. Byron Buxton was a really good player. Still is. I mean, he had a rough season last year, but he's a really good player. He was, for a long time, one of the best center fielders in the league for about 4 or 5 years. His problem was always that he couldn't stay healthy. But Byron Buxton, if you're being compared to Byron Buxton, That's a pretty good comp. And that's what Joel Joseph is getting compared to. That's who he is getting compared to. So I think Seattle may have struck gold again. I'm excited to see this kid play. Not sure if we'll actually see him play in the minor leagues in 2024. He may stick to international ball this year. He's definitely probably about 4 or 5 years away from the major leagues. But once again, Seattle proving we have a market for international prospects. That's how we got Julio Rodriguez. That's how we got Felix Hernandez long ago. And that's how we got a couple of our top prospects in the system. Lazaro Montez, Felton Celestin, and now Joel Joseph. We also got Leandro Romero. He was the 48th best ranked prospect, another shortstop, and we signed him with a $1 million signing bonus. We still have about $2.5 million in international bonus pool money. So if the Mariners want to go out and sign another player, they could. Pretty much all the top kids are off the board at this point. It's been 2 days, and pretty much all of the top rated kids from international countries are already been signed. But sometimes guys come up throughout the summer. Guys come up from Japan, Korea, who you end up wanting to sign. So having a little bit of extra international bonus pool money is definitely not a bad thing, because it gives you a little bit of flexibility in case there is some kind of prospect who pops up in July who's having an incredible year in Venezuela or in the Dominican Republic or in Japan, and you want to bring that person in. Now you have the flexibility to do that. So I'm excited about these kids. I'm excited about Joel Joseph. And that is going to wrap up the show today. This is the NW Sportscast. Hope you all have a great day. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you guys tomorrow.